Hello, hello, my bookish friends. My name is Alex, and welcome to my booktube channel. So if you do not know me, I was a reader growing up. I loved reading, especially in middle school and high school, and then I went to college and studied English. And my love of reading kind of died there, unfortunately. There are many years that I stopped reading and didn't get back into it until the very end of 2020. I have absolutely loved getting back into reading these past couple of years, and just this past week, I decided to pick up a book that I loved in high school and reread it for the first time. I've not done this. I read a few of my middle school favorites back in 2020 to get back into reading, but this series was a beloved series to me in high school, and that is the Infernal Devices series by Cassandra Clare. I started rereading this earlier this week and am completely obsessed. I still love it just as much as I loved it in high school. It is still so good, and it's been 10 years since I read this series for the first time. So I really feel like I'm reading it for the first time again because I completely don't remember what's going to happen. I don't remember how this series ends. And it has been such a blast to dive back into this world that I know I loved so many years ago. So I thought for this video, it would be fun to look through the books that I've read in the past 2 years since getting back into reading and see which ones I think down the road, maybe in another 10 years, will be ones that I reach for, want to pick up again, and will still enjoy. So I went through my Goodreads, looked at everything that I had read over the past 2 years since the end of 2020, and kind of made a list of what books I think are ones that I am going to want to reread for some reason. So I thought I'd just take you through that list. It's not necessarily a list of my favorite books, so they all kind of have a different reason why I think I would want to reread them. So I'm just going to take you through the list and let you know what books I think are ones that I might try and reread in the future. The first is probably maybe an obvious one. It's a favorite of a lot of people, and that is A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. Now, this book was probably one of the first majorly popular series that I got into once I got back into reading, as it is for most people. I had been part of Bookstagram for a little while, seen this one around. I was like, okay, fine, I'm going to get into this series. I do not think I feel the need to reread ACOTAR. I don't. I didn't love it. Honestly, the whole series is not my absolute favorite. However, on SCRIBD, which is my favorite audiobook app, I have a link down below for a referral if you want to try out a free month. And SCRIBD is my favorite audiobook app, and they have the graphic audio version of all of the ACOTAR books. Specifically, I'm so curious to try the graphic audio version of A Court of Mist and Fury because that's my favorite from the series. And I'm super curious about this new graphic audio thing. I love audiobooks. That's the reason I think I'm probably gonna reread A Court of Mist and Fury, maybe sometime in 2023 even. And if I enjoy it a lot, I might end up doing ACOWAR as well. We will just have to see. But that is the first book that I think I'm gonna wanna reread for kind of a random reason, but there you go. The next book that I want to reread at some point is probably no surprise to anyone, and that is A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross. This was my favorite book of 2022. This one and the sequel are both probably books that I will want to reread, and that is because I would love to go through them a little bit more slowly and annotate them because the writing is just exquisite. I am in awe of the prose that Rebecca Ross uses in these books, and I would just love to go through and annotate the heck out of them. I think it would be so much fun, and I think these would just be tabbed to death once I do that. So that's something that I would definitely like to do in the next couple of years. I want to give myself a little bit of a breather since I just recently read them, but I do think that these are ones that I'm definitely going to revisit. The next one is another of my favorites from 2022, and that is A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking by T. Kingfisher. This book is like a middle grade fantasy, and I can just see myself going back to this over and over and over again as a comfort read. I need to get myself a physical copy of it because I think that I will just revisit this kind of a lot. almost in that way I used to revisit Harry Potter. It's just so comforting and like wonderful. It's what I could see myself if I have children in the future, like reading to my children. I just like really, really adore this book, and it's one I think I'll reread multiple times. Another book that I am hopeful to reread at some point is The Nature of Witches by Rachel Griffin. This book is absolutely beautiful. I felt so connected to it because I loved the way that Rachel Griffin discussed real-world issues of climate change and our planet in a fantasy book, and I just really appreciated the way that she did that. This is her debut novel, and it was so good. I remember though blowing through it because I was so obsessed, and so I feel like if I reread it, there would be things that I don't remember, and that would be a super fun reading experience. So this is one that I highly recommend, and I think that I'm hopeful I will get a chance to read it again sometime soon. Another book that I would love to reread is The Black Witch by Laurie Forrest. This book I read a couple of years ago and I devoured it. Now, let me preface this by saying I have since read the rest of the series and I enjoyed books 1 through 3 a ton. Book 4, not so much. So take that as you will, but the first book especially was just absolutely incredible. This is just one of those like really immersive fantasy worlds that has really applicable issues that it deals with that are applicable to our culture and time today. I think are super important conversations to be had. I thought the writing was just impeccable in the first couple of books, and I really enjoyed being a part of this fantasy world. So I really think that I would love to reread the first book, maybe the second and third book, we'll see. But I just think The Black Witch was so much fun, and I could see myself wanting to dive back into it, revisit those characters and storylines, and I think the impact is just super great. So I do recommend it. I just say maybe the fourth book, don't bother with it. I don't know. Anyways, The Black Witch. Okay, next is a book that I am going to have to reread at some point because I need to read this book knowing what happens in it, because there is a twist in this book that I absolutely did not see coming at all. I was completely blindsided, and that is The Kiss of Deception by Mary E. Pearson. I adore this book. It is such a great fantasy young adult book. I highly recommend the entire series. It is so good. And I had my mom read them too, and she enjoyed them as well. But yeah, this book, I just was blown over by something that happens in it, which means I need to read it again and see what in the heck I was doing the first part of this book that I was able to get so blindsided by Mary E. Pearson's writing. Next up, we have a series that I absolutely adored. I had my mom read it, I had my husband read it. It is just such a beautiful series, and I definitely think that I want to revisit it at some point. However, specifically just the first and second book, I don't know if I would reread the whole thing. Maybe I would. Maybe I'd get super into it. But the first and second books are my favorite in this series, and that is An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. I just freaking adore the first 2 books in the series. I love our characters, Laya and Elias. I love the world that we are in. I love the adventures that we go on in these first 2 books. They are just so strong, so well written, and these ones are less brutal than the last 2, although they are pretty brutal as far as YA fantasy goes. But yes, I definitely really enjoy this one. This first one is Trials, which is such a fun trope. And so I do think that these are ones that I will revisit at some point in the future as well. Now, the next book that I want to revisit is one of the very first audiobooks I ever listened to. And you guys, I don't know how I finished this book. I did not have a handle on what listening to audiobooks was like when I listened to this. And this was absolutely the wrong choice to be one of my first audiobooks, and that is The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. You guys, this book was a monster to try and follow along in my head, not really knowing fully how audiobooks work, and this is such an intense mystery of so many moving parts and characters you need to keep track of, and I feel like I totally missed out on the fun of this story. I mean, I still loved it. I really enjoyed this book, but I feel like I could have enjoyed it so much more had it not been one of the first audiobooks I ever listened to. So I would love to give it another go and enjoy it again. However, I do need to give myself some space because obviously I very clearly remember how this ends and what happens. So hopefully I will have a Infernal Devices experience and at some point forget what happens in this book so that I can read it again. The last two books on this list are two of the very first books that I read in 2020 when I was getting back into reading. The first one is The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. This is a historical fiction, and oh my gosh, this story, I will need to be in the right headspace to read this again because it is heavy, it is sad. Have all the tissues ready when you read this, but this story is so beautiful. Kristen Hanna's writing is just exquisite, and yeah, this one has just been on my mind as like, wow, I really freaking loved that story. I want to revisit it at some point. I think it's really beautiful and really well written. So The Nightingale is one that I think I will want to reread at some point. And lastly, the book that really got me back into reading, the first kind of adult fantasy that was new to me that I read in 2020 is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. This is one of my absolute favorite books of all time. It probably always will remain on that list. I just adore this book. I think this is one that I will want to revisit periodically, probably more than once, because it's just so beautiful. And I think it's just gonna be one of those comfort reads for me because it means so much to me for getting me back into reading when I was in kind of a dark spot, a hard spot, like most of us were in that year. And reading was just such a comfort to me to fall back into a hobby that I loved so much when I was young and has now brought me so much community. So I don't know if that was a fun video for anyone to watch. I hope it was. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a like. I hope you were able to get some good recommendations out of this video. Let me know if you did. I know that I didn't give super in-depth synopses, but more just gave you a snapshot of what I would be looking for out of a reread of these, why I'm interested in rereading them. So hopefully that lets you know that these are some great books that I recommend. I really liked them all, and I hope that you can find something you want to read from this list. Please subscribe to my channel if you have not yet already. I would really appreciate it. Every single one of you that subscribes to my channel, it means so much to me that you want to be here, want to see my content and watch my videos. I am just super grateful for you. So thank you so much for subscribing and being a part of this little community. That is everything that I have for you today. So I will talk to you all in the next video. Bye, friends.